We're going to be having a conversation. That's what we're doing today. And these three amazing panelists are going to be giving you some tips, some nuggets, and some insight on the experience that they have in their organizations when it comes to well-being. So first, I would like to introduce Andrea Maloney, who is here with us. She's a regional HR manager for Canada at NVIDIA. Also joining us is Travis Dutka, Senior Director of Culture at 360 Insights, and as well Kelsey Ostland, People and Culture Manager at Coconut Software. Thank you again so much to the three of you for being with us today. Like I said, we're going to be having a conversation, and let's start off by talking about your experience. I think it's always beneficial when we do these sessions to give people a little bit of insight into who you are, what you do, how you got there, and what your organization does. So, Andrea, I'm going to start with you. If you can take a couple minutes and introduce yourself, that would be great.
Great. Hi. Thanks, Anne. So welcome to everybody who's joining today. Thank you so much for attending. My name is Andrea Maloney. I have worked in, and it's hard to even say this out loud, I've worked in HR now for 27 years. And so I find myself in the final third of my career. I'm so happy to have landed at NVIDIA in this chapter. Like many of you, I began my career in, let's say, a niche section of HR and then moved through the different functions throughout my career. I found myself, I want to say it was probably around 2000, in Vancouver, BC, working in the video game industry, which was really interesting, super challenging, very dynamic. Indie games was kind of in its heyday at that time. And really had the good fortune of landing in a company called Radical Entertainment that was a direct competitor to EA, that was landed on the Great Place to Work lists and other types of recognized lists for employee experience at that time. So it was a really great intro to how to build programs and culture and benefits that really resonated with employees and the listening and engagement that needed to happen to get there. I came back to Toronto. Spent a bunch of time in the US, came back to Toronto about 14 years ago, and a small .com that I was working for was purchased by NVIDIA. So I don't know if you guys know the name, but NVIDIA is making quite a splash in the media in the last couple of years. They're based in Silicon Valley. And it's just been an absolute rocket ride. When I joined NVIDIA, the company was, I think the Canadian presence was about 30 people nationwide, and we are now exceeding 450 nationwide. So really great to be here and really excited to share some info today and participate in the dialogue. Thanks,
Great.
Anne.
Thanks, Andrea. Thank you. How about you, Travis? Tell us about you.
All right. Well, I started studying HR in university because I was curious about people. I always wanted to be in a profession that helped people. And then the more that I studied HR, I was like, I don't know if this is a role that helps people. I don't think I want to do HR. So I got out of HR because I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up, and I'm still figuring that out. But I wanted to be in a role that helped people, and I kind of went through this path of nonprofit, small foreign currency banking, kind of all over the map until I got a call from my mentor, and he said, "Hey, do you want to move back home?" I was living in Ottawa at the time, and do you want to help me build a great company? Because I was trying to find a job in resumes are tricky, a lot of us that are applying for jobs, and I was trying to get a job, and he just said, well, you can keep looking for a great company to work for, or you can move back home and help me build a great company. And he was the chief of staff at 360 Insights at the time. There was about 48 people when I joined, and I joined in marketing. There was no HR department at the time. We were 48 people, and it was like the CEO and accounting, and everyone just cared and it wanted to be a great place. But you start hitting that point where you need to scale and figure out, well, who's going to take care of the people? And so our chief of staff, who was my mentor, my friend, he was kind of the HR department, and he brought us along the journey. And Christy, and as we grew, it turned into this really awesome thing, but we were trying to figure it out all together. Todd passed away. He was our chief of staff in 2013, and it really shifted everything because we had to start to formalize something that he embodied. And Jason, our CEO, like really cared about creating a great company. So we got together, and I got to be a part of, from 50 people, 48, 50 people to almost 700 globally now, dabbling in all the different parts of of HR. I like to say that I play on the fun side of HR now. We've got our HR ops and people and culture team that take care of the day-to-day and all the amazing mentoring, coaching, and the back on tracks. And I get to focus today on coaching and scaling. As we know, middle managers, people leaders are the ones that really impact our day-to-day for most of our team members. So I get to spend a lot of time, partnering with L&D and our people partners and doing all those sorts of things. But it started off not, in that space of trying to figure out how do I help people. The more I studied it, I was like, do I get a chance to actually help people in the world of HR? You learn about labor relations and negotiations, and it's a little overwhelming. But when you get into that space, you realize that you can make a difference. And so I guess that was a long-winded intro, but I'm pretty passionate about the
Yeah.
space and helping people and finding that balance of the heart and then the systems so that you can make it scalable and accessible to every team member, especially as you go, globally or regionally, and
Yeah.
there's so many differences across the board.
Excellent. Thanks, Travis. Kelsey, how about you? Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm located in Saskatoon, despite what my background looks like. This is just wishful thinking on my side, so bear with me with my moving background here. A little bit opposite of what Travis has said here. I went to university a little later in life after, working for a number of different organizations where I didn't feel that people were super valued. And interestingly, throughout university, I decided to take an English literature degree, actually, which, eventually I was planning to go back, hopefully become a professor. That was the goal. But I took some time off after getting my undergrad and was looking for a job. And what really stood out to me when I was job searching was Coconut's strong female leadership, spearheaded by our CEO, Catherine Renier. So I, read her blogs, the website, and just overall found her approach and dedication to company values super inspiring. And it was a place that I really wanted to work. So I started at Coconut over 7 years ago. And I actually started out as Catherine's executive assistant. We didn't have an HR function at that time. We were only about 20 people across Saskatchewan and Ontario at that time. And I just sort of started organically taking on a lot of the HR responsibilities because we didn't have that function. And because of the organization that I work for, I was really passionate about, elevating people, creating programs that really help to support them. And it was an area that I really wanted to focus on. So I was lucky to have that recognized by Catherine and the rest of the executive team. They helped get me a little bit of education in the HR area as well, so I wasn't flying quite so blind as I might have been before. And I really started to get led into that role of people and culture manager at Coconut, which I'm super passionate about, and I'm just really fortunate to be able to support such amazing team members. So I mean, since I started, we've grown to over 120 employees. Our people and culture team has grown to 5 amazing team members who are equally as dedicated and passionate about fostering, strong, connected, high-performing teams as well. And if spoiler alert, I didn't go back to get my PhD in English literature because I'm just so passionate about what we do at Coconut and really supporting those teams.
Amazing. Thank you. So the one thread or the one thing I'm hearing, and I think probably everyone else caught up or caught on to as well, is all three of you have moved and grown with organizations from, Andrea, 30 people, Travis, like 50 people, Kelsey, 20 people, and to now you've experienced this growth and scale. And Travis, you really talked about it. Like, how do you standardize processes? But I think too, it's how do we keep the individual in our organizations as we grow. So I'm going to segue really into looking at, measuring well-being, and some of the programs that the organizations have implemented. One thing I did want to just call out as well for those of you in Canada on the call. So today is Pink Shirt Day, and I just thought it just happened this way that we're having this conversation on Pink Shirt Day, which for everybody, just a reminder, it's to show support for safe and inclusive schools. It really started at the school level, but it's schools, workplaces, and communities, right? So I think this is such an appropriate way to start our conversation around inclusion and the impact that inclusion has on well-being. So I'll put that there. And the other thing too is what we can talk about is there's a lot of uncertainty right now. And I don't think that I'm unique in feeling that way. From the economy, family responsibilities, cost of living, just a lot of things I think are going on in people's lives, and certainly from a workplace perspective, like that can't not come into our workplaces. Like we are whole people, we are human beings, we bring everything to work. And that's where it's about being inclusive, right? Like people being able to bring everything with them to work. So with that in mind, let's talk about some of the well-being initiatives that your organization has in place, also how you measure, because we really want to talk about measurement. Like this isn't about just kind of making assumptions, that sort of thing. So Andrea, I'll start with you and go back to, if you could just share some of the things that NVIDIA does around well-being. Like what does it mean in your organization? What does well-being mean in your organization? What are some of the things you do, and then how do you measure it? That was a
Right.
really big question, but
Yeah.
I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, and thanks. And I agree with you. It is a holistic approach to well-being in the workplace because, employees' lives are incredibly dynamic and, complex. We've got, an aging population. Many of our employees are struggling with elder care. Some have young children, some have both. Others are dealing with kind of, teen issues in the home. So, just coming back, first of all, to like the tools that we use, a really powerful tool that we've been using at NVIDIA is our pulse surveys. So rather than doing the once a year annual survey, rather than leaning only on our Great Place to Work feedback, we've instituted these really agile, nimble, quick kind of pulse checkpoints for employees. And it's often topical. It's often related to whatever we're happening to see in the workplace, that's bubbling up as an issue at that moment, or related to the strategy and the direction that we want to go. So the most recent pulse survey that we've been working with was the Working Together pulse survey. So what does that look like in terms of transparent communication? What's the feedback that we're receiving about the relationship that they have with their team? Are employees that are several layers removed from e-staff, are they aware about what the direction is for the company? And it really helps us, like I said, to stay nimble and agile and respond in the moment to what's happening. The pulse surveys are anonymous. The info is blinded. We use Glint as a platform at NVIDIA for those pulse surveys. And it's just, the data is so fascinating. Like we often think of our function in HR as being, and it's very frontline, human-centered, very, very in front of folks on the line day to day with whatever those questions might be. But leaning into that data, like Kelsey, I'm an English Lit grad, so it doesn't come naturally to me to lean into the numbers and charts and everything. But once I realized the power of that, you're able to thread a narrative on what's actually happening in your organization in that moment. And I think that helps to steer our direction on the conversation we have with benefits providers, with L&D, with onboarding, about where we're seeing those gaps and how we can adjust the program that we're offering and the resources we're bringing to the table. So, that's a little bit about how we're listening. It's one of the ways that we're listening. Obviously, standard best practices like one-to-ones, team meetings. We have, a quarterly town hall with Jensen where the entire global team watches him stream live from Santa Clara. So there's all of these ways that we're making sure that employees are connected and listening to what the messaging is, as well as being able to feedback. To touch for a bit on these uncertain times, I was thinking about this morning as we, were preparing for the webinar today. And it's the one thing that we did in the last couple of weeks is it was really important from our employees to hear from us that we acknowledged the uncertainty. We didn't have all the answers or visibility, but that we were very present and understood the concerns, and we were actively watching and ready to respond to whatever that might be. We heavily use Slack here in the NVIDIA Canada operation. It's been invaluable for me as often as it can be exhausting, because it seems like the expectation is almost instant feedback and instant response and instant connectivity. We are also able to harness the power of messaging out very quickly and as authentically as possible. So, I issued just a quick a quick commentary on this. We know it's anxiety provoking. We've heard from you. We're watching. And again, reinforcing that who we are as a company is not going to change despite how chaotic the world might be. So leaning into those core principles and reminding, our team about who we've always been, which is family and employee centric.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. So yeah, Travis, please.
While Andrea was sharing, I was just wondering,
Yeah.
because the million dollar question is always like, how often do you survey, and then what do you do with the data?
Right.
So if I'm wondering, I think maybe some of the people watching might also be curious because everyone's got a bit of a different take on it. So you do the pulse surveys, which I love. I'm just curious, how often do you do the pulse surveys, and then what do you do with that to feed it back? Because there's the listening part and then the acting part.
Oh, awesome question. Yeah, I believe we're doing them quarterly. It seems like if we need to do that on an interim basis, if something's popping up, we'll do it more than just quarterly. And then what we do is I've just met with actually our leadership team yesterday to first share the results with leadership team and say, okay, here's what we're seeing. What are your thoughts on this? Let's talk about ideas on how to address this or get in front of it. And then I actually host quarterly town halls as well with the Canadian team, which with the entire employee base, to share results with them, talk about how we're approaching that. So we do respond. It's not just survey and then retreat. It's survey, strategize, and then communicate back. So yeah,
Nice.
great
Amazing.
question, Travis. Thanks.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I think it's and I'm gonna go down the data route for a sec because I'm not English. I didn't get a degree in English, but I am also fascinated with data, and well, great place to work. We like data too, but it's the notion of the leading and the lagging measures, right? Where maybe those annual surveys give you the lagging measures,
Yes.
where it's based on history, but doing those surveys, those pulse surveys, those sort of more reactive, like, hey, something's up, let's get in front of it, and getting those leading measures so you can really get in front of something. So if we're talking again in terms of things that are the folks watching today or listening today can take away, it's how can you do those, how do you have this combination of leading and lagging measures? How do you be proactive, and then also how do you react to things? So Travis, I'm going to turn over to you now, and if you can talk about 360 insights, how you measure some of the maybe unique programs. I found it really interesting, Andrea, you talking about connection, and that from sometimes we conflate well-being with mental health, and that's definitely part of it, and then there's so many other elements. So I'm just going back to I heard you talking about connecting with people, listening to people, responding to the things that you're hearing. So really appreciated hearing that from you, and I'm going to stop talking now, and Travis, I'll let you talk.
Yeah, well, just real quick touch on surveys, just so people can take in a bunch of different ways, because we've experimented over the years. At one point, we were doing quarterly, and then we tried weekly with a different tool, which got a little bit overwhelming because you got to kind of find like what's your team's cadence of what do they want to give, and then how do you feed that back in a timely way. So we're now monthly, and we have 3 standard questions and then a hot topic section, which is kind of that way of, and then pandemic, big world events, you can put out some ones there, but that's kind of where we found our sweet spot, and then we publish it, talk about it. One thing I'll touch on that has been really helpful for us is looking at like a communication cadence. When you want to be grounded in certainty and you want to feel connected. A lot of us shifted from pre-pandemic, in office. We were almost all focused on in office. And we had some good momentum coming out of that. And now 3, 4, 5, I don't know, 10 years in, when did it happen? We're kind of reinventing, going, okay, well, this is hybrid. This is here to stay. We're a global company now. How do we reinvent? Because some of the stuff's starting to diminish that we had pre-pandemic, and we're going, what do we need to reinvent and reinvigorate? So the way that I like to look at it is we found some anchor points. So board meetings, and there's a lot of information that gets pulled together for board meetings. So pre-board meeting, what needs to be gathered, and then post-board meeting as a looking at a way of not getting leaders to double work or reporting or anything like that, but everyone's doing the push for the board meeting. So being able to take that and then post-board meeting be like a quarterly all hands to get that information out to the team. We also do monthly messages, which is like a short all hands, business updates, those sorts of things. Weekly, Daily we do a huddle. We stopped on Wednesdays to do a no meeting Wednesday, or attempt to, especially during the pandemic, and that remote work, so you can actually focus on work. But the daily, we call it 9 at 9 Eastern, and it's to inform, inspire, or educate the team on what's happening in the business. So it's welcoming new people, featuring a part of the business, an AMA weekly on Thursdays with our leadership update. So those kind of connection points and that rhythm in a world of uncertainty, like having some of those anchor points, and some of it's so silly, and we're like, who's going to play music? So we have a schedule. We have a team of culture ambassadors, and they volunteer to play music before huddle. And if you join at 8:45 Eastern, the people will be like, where's the music? Where's the music? They know they can join for 10 minutes before. They don't turn their cameras on. They have music playing. And it's something so little, and it doesn't seem to, like, okay, well, that's not driving revenue. It's not driving innovation, but it's those anchor points in daily routines and grounded in some of those connection points, and there's, the chats that are happening. So the cadence is one piece of it. The pulse, we call them employee voice, with the hot topic component added on. The other, participation, almost more than the results themselves, is one of my favorite metrics. Is, are people taking the time to letting you know? Like I always say, a survey of one that says Travis is awesome, great, my mom filled it out, 100%. But if 100 people fill it out and I'm in the 60%, I know I can improve. I know what I'm doing well. So participation is always a really, really important metric when we're looking at data, as opposed to just good scores. And then the other thing I'll just touch on real quick is we recently launched. So Catherine, who's one of our people and talent partners in England, brought the initiative of mental health first aiders. So we, again, not only mental health in terms of well-being as a whole, but we recently trained our entire people and culture team, along with 12 team members who applied for the role, got selected, got trained, and there are various roles, various levels in the organization, and it's featuring. So one of the metrics is we'll call it usage or touch points, just to get a sense of how many people are reaching out, how are they doing, work related. So there's one of the programs, the basic stuff is like the EAPs and reminding people to use it. And I've recently been through a pretty challenging year myself. And so I like to say, like, not only am I a promoter, but I'm like a member, right? And when you use it yourself, and I'd encourage anyone listening, like, call your EAP, try it out, ask them about elder care, ask them about parenting, so you understand what it's like to call, and then you can talk about it in the kind of open and honest way that it's not so scary. Because there's still so much stigma around taking care of yourself, and creating a space for the team, empowering the team to take care of themselves, which is a pretty tricky thing to do sometimes.
Yeah, great point. To really try out your programs and services and systems so that you can really get that that employee experience. One thing I did want to touch on, and then Kelsey, I'm going to come over to you, is you mentioned the sort of the rhythm or the cadence of your communication had diminished a little bit since COVID. Or I don't want to. I think that's sort of what you were talking about. And a great place to work actually just did some research and found there's a well-being index, and that actually it went up during COVID. And a lot of organizations, and whether you were office and then you went to work remotely, or whether you were a frontline employee in your organization, but organizations really tended to double down on their communication, on their caring, like gift baskets. If you would do a Kahoot, I think is like just an example of all of those things that you would do sort of online to keep people connected, or what, those kinds of things. And now we are seeing, this research has shown a little bit of a decline where, organizations, if you're remote, or just the attention isn't so much on those activities that were happening during COVID. So really interesting to hear your reflections on, things. We're just seeing this kind of, so how can organizations kind of go, oh, what were we doing well during COVID? What were employees responding to, and how can we maybe bring some of that back? So with that said, Kelsey, why don't you talk to us about what Coconut's doing around well-being? What does it mean in your organization?
Sure. I think that one of the key things when it comes to well-being and also navigating uncertainty is just making sure that there are various forums for employees to have a voice within your organization. And I think, anonymously is also very important as well. So people can really share their full opinions and their full perspectives on what they're feeling and what they really need from the organization. Andrea, Travis, you kind of both touched on this, but survey fatigue can be a real thing as well. So trying to find the right cadence for your organization in terms of those more formal surveys, I think is really important. For us, we survey 3 times a year. We have our long form crew view survey, which is like our annual engagement survey. Of course, we do Great Place to Work as well. And then we have a pulse survey in May as well, which is like shorter form, but still has some of those consistent questions that we ask across the other surveys as well. And really what we do with that information and with that data is we try to dial down on a department perspective as much as possible. And we share that through business partner connects with leaders across each department to really understand and deliver insights about what's most important to those teams specifically. So it's not only about, the company perspective and what can we do for all employees across the organization, but what's really driving different behaviors across different departments and different teams as well, which I think is really important and really insightful for leaders to understand so that we can pivot or, offer more supports in different areas that are needed for those teams specifically. Just I think having those business partner relationships within each department is super important too. Not only is it a support for those leaders specifically, but it's also a great support for team members to know that they have somebody specifically on the PNC or HR team that they can reach out to, who can really, provide them with insights and supports and, offer them what they need to really, create value in their own lives and for their own well-being as well. 3 times a year doesn't seem like that much, but we have received feedback that too many surveys is too much for the team sometimes. I know we're all busy, but I love the idea of like the short form surveys as well, either quarterly or monthly. I think that's great. One of the ways that we try to kind of get around that as well is we have an anonymous feedback forum as well, where employees can ask questions. It's called Your Voice. It allows them to just anonymously reach out to us, ask any questions or share any concerns that they have. So that allows us to kind of pinpoint a little bit more directly when there are, larger concerns that are happening across the organization and be able to pivot and provide resources that really help to support in those areas. We also have monthly town halls as well, where we really focus on celebrating team wins. We celebrate things like, anniversaries across the team, new hires. We get to know each other a little bit more. We try to incorporate things like music and everything as well. It's amazing how much those sorts of things can really like help to inspire people and make you feel more connected and, really start conversations too. But then the other purpose of those meetings monthly is to provide insights into what's going on across the business, across different departments to everybody within the company, and also offer opportunities for people to ask questions, face to face with leaders about what's going on and, really voice any thoughts that they have as well. So it really just offers us a really good opportunity to have those discussions. Yeah, I mean, really those surveys though, they're so important to be able to offer those trends over time. I think that's what's most valuable about them. It's great to know, what's happening at this point in time. But it's also great to know, what has changed since the last survey that we did. What have we implemented that has impacted, positively for team members? What have we impacted that might be more negative for team members as well, so that we can pivot on that side. And I think just, being open with those insights is really important. We also try to be very transparent about what changes we're making that are based on feedback specifically. So, we call it like you asked, we listened. This is what you asked for based on your feedback in the surveys, in your voice, what we're hearing just across the company. This is what we're doing to implement changes to, programs or, implementing new initiatives as well that can help support based on your feedback specifically. And I think that really empowers team members to want to participate in those surveys and want to tell you what's going on with them, because they see that you actually are making those changes. And getting that participate, like you said, Travis, right? Like having people respond to a survey is great, but if you get 10%, 20% of people responding, it's not super helpful. And so I think being able to find that cadence that works for your organization, so you're getting up into those 90% response rates is what's valuable for the team.
So I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about leaders and because and like direct people leaders. So that tends to be the person who's going to be the one to be kind of like something's off, right? Something's what supports or training do you offer to the leaders in your organizations? What can you share with the folks on the call today about how you can help your leaders to be that first line sort of confidant for your employees? I don't know who wants to jump in.
Sure.
Andrea does, or Kelsey does.
So
Okay.
I'll share this. We had something really interesting happen last year. I was invited to participate in our annual career week, which our team at headquarters organizes, and they're amazing. And so I was invited to build a presentation and deliver a webinar on psychological safety. And it was, I was so happy with the other conversations that spun out of that webinar and the requests for additional education and just some of the I guess just the interest around it and communicating. I think some of those our leaders had never really heard before that being vulnerable and being open with team members and coming from a position of authenticity and curiosity and demonstrating that, it's okay to be human in the workplace. And I genuinely care about you human to human. And this doesn't have to be really structured. And our dialogue doesn't have to kind of meet, it doesn't have to relate to certain checkpoints. This is simply about me checking in on you and ensuring that, I'm creating an opportunity for that dialogue to happen. That was for whatever reason, people have become, and maybe it's just some of the compliance that's sprung up around these conversations in the workplace that has almost made things become very stilted. So, if I'm, sharing with a manager, for you to connect effectively, you have to model that behavior. You have to dialogue in an authentic way, that it's okay to share what you don't know. It's okay to share that you can fully identify with what somebody's gone through, that it's okay to share a personal experience about having gone through that. I think, and creating the conditions and the opportunity of being sensitive around when disclosure can happen, ensuring that it's not, being sensitive to when somebody might need to use different channels of communication to share different experiences that are happening, and identifying that communication happens differently for everybody. I might be the kind of person that really prefers an off-site once a week coffee with my manager as we circle the block. Somebody else, and we have many folks, at our company that are like this, they just really are more comfortable in an online chat discussion. They have a really difficult time with face-to-face communication, and flexing our approach depending on the needs of the individual. So I think there's just a tremendous opportunity in HR for leadership around psychological safety, creating those conditions, educating folks on the tenets of that, that can really shift a culture tremendously. Because if your folks don't trust that you're going to be there to help and they can't reveal their full and holistic selves, you're going to get only that surface contribution, I think, from it. And, and that has a direct impact, I think, as well on things like turnover, LOAs. I mean, I can't tell you the number of conversations that we've had where, we could definitely sense there was a breakdown, happening in performance. And it turned out that we hadn't really fully uncovered the reasons behind that. And the solution in us in HR working with that leadership team on what the options for support might look like. And it's not a one size fits all. It's not, hey, we're just delegating you to our short-term disability program and off you go. It's, it's ensuring, maybe it's flex time. Maybe there's some burnout happening. Maybe it's about communicating on expectations. Oftentimes we're seeing folks that are far exceeding, the pressure that they're putting on themselves in terms of performance is far more than the manager's doing. And there's just a disconnect, and that's creating, some pressure. So, I think it's just really important to ensure that managers understand that that dialogue and creating a condition for authenticity and operating based on those core tenets is an important way to create that in the workplace.
Thanks. Kelsey, did you want to? Yeah.
Sure. Sorry, I'm very excited about what you're about. Yeah. I totally agree. I think showing up with authenticity is the most important thing. Creating the space for people to show up the way that they're most comfortable as well is super important. Nobody wants to be working with, a bunch of robots. We have to show that we are also human and we identify with the needs that they have as well. And so, I mean, we talked a lot about gathering feedback. That's a great way to understand where people, feel that they need to be understood better. At Coconut, we've created a specialized library of resources in what we call our Coconut Academy that helps support leaders on courses with like neurodiversity and emotional intelligence. That's been really important to our team. We also have an internal wiki resource that's specifically for people managers that has a number of different sections that go through, different processes and activities that you can do with your team. But we have one section that's specifically devoted to helping to manage through personal change on your team as well. And we find that this has been really helpful just to have some resources laid out in addition to having those business partner connects and being able to kind of talk through what's going on a personal level as well. We're putting together some, FAQs about supporting individuals facing change. There is a lot of uncertainty right now. Different people have different needs. And so being able to, equip managers with the resources to be able to have those conversations, I think is, very important. And having different committees as well that are, I think, employee focused, like social committee, that's a fun committee. Obviously, it, gets people involved, but, in activities that they really want to be doing. And then, of course, a DEIB committee that really has like the voice of your employees as the driver behind what's going on there, I think is super important too. So just being able to have, I think, a number of different facets that help to support these people managers,
Yeah.
and ultimately the employees is super important.
Thanks. Travis, how about you? How do you
Yeah, I
support
think
leaders? Yeah.
I'll add just two kind of quick thoughts here, because the stuff that's been talked about is so good. What the one thing that was highlighted to me on one engagement survey, one time someone said, "Hey, we should do RSP matching," and I was like,
Mm.
"We've been doing that for like 100 years." So great suggestion, but it was an aha moment that just because as a people and culture team, we're really, really aware of everything we offer to our team because we're thinking about it, we're designing it, and we assume, I don't know about you, but I assume that everyone else also knows that, especially people leaders, because I feel like they're superhuman and they know everything that I know, plus how to do all the other stuff that they do. And so what I realize is that's not true. They don't know. They might be brand new to the company and they might have
Yeah.
grown, whatever. So two things that we've done that have made it, I think, really helpful is we've created a People Leaders Digest, which comes out weekly. And our communications lead just boils down some of the main things that happened in the business. So like a couple key points from the executive team, just so that they know what's important for them. Reviews are coming up. Remember, like, talk to your team about how they're feeling, like ask them how they're feeling, like whatever it might be. It's a weekly, just like 5 bullet points, either from the executive team, people and culture, right? Reminders, just so that they can pass it on to their team, they can be support. Now, do they all read it? No. But it's another way of over communicating some of the basic stuff, because in the midst of they're trying to do, likely in most of our companies, they're a player coach, like there's still stuff they're doing, plus that there's growth. And so trying to make it really, really simple, and whether that's a wiki or an email, but like, here's your 5 things you need to know this week to pass on to your team. The other thing that we've done, and it's relatively new, and you might already do this, but we have built in like leader feedback. So on the review process, you get a couple quick questions. And it's not like, is my leader a good leader? It's very pointed as saying, has my leader talked to me about my career progression? Because that feels good. You feel connected, you feel stable when you know that you have a path. And has my people leader talked about the pulse results? So built right into that feedback, and we're not looking to slap hands. We're using it as a reminder. Hey, I know my team's going to be asked about it, so I want to make sure that I
Mm,
do it. Because if the people leader then is taking time in a monthly or week, whatever their team meeting is to go through those results, it's that what Kelsey and Andrea talked about is you're listening, but then you're feeding it back. So trying to really make it easy for people leaders to be successful people leaders, knowing that the stuff that we care about, they care about, but it's also way down their plate because they're worried about clients or delivery or whatever it is that they're focused on the result that they're pressed for. And so
right.
we want to make it easy, like self-serve the stuff that they need to help their team succeed.
Oh,
Nice.
Travis, you made a great point. Like it just sparked something for me. We forget what they don't know or they haven't been exposed to.
Right.
Like this is what we do, right? So
Hmm.
we're immersed in it. We've had this benefit of kind of, receiving all of this training and all of this kind of exposure through osmosis and even just the day-to-day experience. So real light bulb moment for me was sharing some of those resources like, Simon Sinek's, books and some of the articles that are coming out, and Brene Brown daring greatly and seeding that within our leadership team. And it was really exciting to see leaders light up and kind of go, wow, this is so outside of the box of what I'm normally involved in as an engineer. And somebody's already done the work and the hustle to put these thoughts together. So and it had just never, I guess, it had just never occurred to me that maybe they don't have exposure to that. So I just
Yeah.
thought that was a great point, right? It's not just like, well, what haven't they read? What haven't they received training on? You kind of become so far down the path that you take some things for granted. And back to basics is,
And I know no one on the call is like this probably except me, but there's this like HR cynicism where you start to like really well, detest is a strong word, but you're like people, oh, and people leaders, like why can't you just be a good lead? It's like, oh, they are trying, right? So how can we continue to support them because they don't know all the stuff that we have. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Now we're at 1:45. I can't believe 45 minutes went by so fast. Such a good session. I think we could keep talking. I know we could keep talking. There was one question in the Q&A. I'm just going to say, what kind of training for leaders would you recommend to build trust and safety to be confidants for their team? I don't know if any of you have any sort of formal structured training that you've offered. If you could just share that real quick before we leave, or is it more sort of organic?
So I had one leader reach out to me here in Toronto, and she said, I think we just really need to go back to basics. And so I developed, and we do a lot of this at NVIDIA, is a lot of custom training and development for our teams.
Mhm.
And so, it was really a 6-week course, almost a mini course. We touched on some of the primary principles about leadership. So again, one of them was
Okay.
psychological safety.
Yeah.
Another might be, engagement and identifying opportunity for engagement. So it really was custom built for us. We
Mhm.
also have a really robust learning and development platform that includes not just the technical components, but also
Mhm.
people management and
Mhm.
best practices related to people development.
Okay.
So,
And yeah, I know
yeah.
Kelsey, you mentioned that you have some resources available too. So I know what behind the scenes we've been dropping people's LinkedIn's and that sort of thing. So if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to Andrea, Travis, or Kelsey to see what their organizations are doing to start that conversation. Again, we're at 1:46. I hate to cut it short, but or not short, we're at time. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but just in closing, want to thank the three of you so much for coming on today, being willing to give your time to share what you're doing in your organizations. Again, I'll just go back to just talking about uncertainty, and I think what's really resonated for me in this conversation with all three of you is it's about the connection with people and continual connection. It's not about once a year or once a month. It's what works for your organization, but really making sure that you are maintaining that connection, and helping leaders to build that authenticity. I know, Travis, you shared your own personal example of, you're the poster child for your own service, and you can say, hey, I had this happen to me. Let me share what worked for me with others, because then they feel maybe more open to trying that. So with that said, again, I know people can connect through LinkedIn, that sort of thing. But again, want to thank you so much for taking the time. We can have part two in a couple months. Let's get back together for part two, because I do think we could have more of a more fulsome conversation. So thank you so much. And everybody for participating today. Really appreciate that. Spending some time with us today. And yeah, come back next month. We'll have another topic and we will see you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.